Hello everyone. Once again welcome to SJ's classes. I hope all of you along with your family members are safe. I would like to request you to strictly adhere to the health advisory that has been issued by the authorities concerned. We have been hit by the second wave of coronavirus global pandemic, and it's our duty to remain safe as well as to protect our family members. So please be safe. Let's also not put an end to our learning. I hope this YouTube channel of mine is gradually turning out into a repository of knowledge for all literature enthusiasts and specifically for students who have opted BA English Language and Literature under the University of Kerala. It's a poem that I would like to interpret for you today. The poem is titled Possibilities. It's written by the Polish poet Wislawa Szymborska. Here is an introduction to the poet. Maria Wislawa Anna Szymborska was a Polish poet, essayist, and translator. She was born on the 2nd of July 1923 in Kornik, which is in western Poland. She published her debut poem titled Looking for a Word or I Seek the Word, as it appeared in certain collections, in a Polish daily in 1945. Her first volume of poetry, That's Why We Are Alive, was published in 1952. And it's only after she received the Nobel Prize for Literature that her works gained global reputation. She received international recognition when she won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1996. Altogether, she published 16 collections of poetry, and many of her works have been translated into English and many European languages as well as into Arabic, Hebrew, Japanese, Persian, and Chinese. Some of her collections that have been translated into English include People on a Bridge, 1990, View with a Grain of Sand Selected Poems, 1995, Miracle Fair, 2001, and Monologue of a Dog that came out in 2005. Let's also look at some of her the style that she employed while writing poetry. She frequently employed literary devices like irony, paradox, contradictions, juxtaposition, understatement, and she did this to illuminate philosophical themes and obsessions. Many of her poems even feature war and terrorism. Her work quickly engages reader, typically drawing them into an encounter with the familiar and also the seemingly insignificant objects and events, but from a new perspective, which reveals their harsh hidden truths or celebrates their unseen miraculous qualities. So she focuses our attention towards with the familiar, which you normally tend to ignore, and also the seemingly insignificant objects. And she helps us to view them from a different perspective so that we can discover the hidden truths in them, to celebrate the miraculous qualities of these seemingly insignificant objects. And some of the awards which she received in her lifetime includes the Polish Pen Club Prize, an honorary doctorate from Adam Mickiewicz University, which is in Poland, the Herder Prize. The Herder Prize is named after the German philosopher Johann Herder, and it's a prestigious international prize awarded every year to scholars and artists from Central and Southeast Europe whose life and work have contributed to the cultural understanding of European countries and their peaceful interrelations. This particular award was established in 1963. And she has also received the Gede Prize, and Gede Prize is given in memory of Goethe, who was a German poet, playwright, and novelist. And it's made by the city of Frankfurt in Germany. Wislawa died on February 1st, 2012, at the age of 88. That's all regarding the poet. Now, let me give you an introduction to the poem that we are about to read today. This particular poem, which is titled Possibilities, it's similar to many of Wislawa Szymborska's poems, and it addresses the topic of human existence. This poem has been mostly noted for its simplicity and directness. The simplicity with which she directly addresses many of the, as I said earlier, seemingly insignificant things in life, things which are too much familiar to us, too much familiar that we tend to ignore them. So, this particular poem is noted for its simplicity and directness, and at the same time, it points to deep philosophical reflections. The very title signifies that particular idea that I just conveyed, possibilities. It indicates the numerous possibilities that life offers us, the choices that we make, and the sacrifices that we have to make so as to prioritize the selections that we made. She uses repetition in this particular poem. It's a poetical device that she has employed in the poem so as to emphasize the purpose of the poem. And the purpose is to convey the message that sacrifices have to be made and one loses possibilities when making a choice. That's the message that she conveys through the poem. The poem also stresses the fact that life offers you various choices from which you ought to make selections, and the selections are purely an individual's discretion. It's you who decide, nobody else. So, the sacrifices that you make as part of your selections, the selections or choices that you make, it's your discretion, it's your decision. But the problem is that turning to something involves turning away from many other things. That's why brought both these words, selections or choices and sacrifices. You opt and you opt certain things in your life, and thereby you opt out of several things. So the responsibility after all lies in deciding. One absurd fact that you would find in the poem is that the poet does not disclose the reasons behind her choices. Maybe it is to imply that all the choices that she made or you make have reasons that justify the selection. Now let's read the poem Possibilities by Wislawa Szymborska. I prefer movies. I prefer cats. I prefer the oaks along the Varta. I prefer Dickens to Dostoevsky. So she begins the poem by stating that she prefers movies. Now, there are various other visual art forms, but she prefers movies. I prefer cats. There are numerous other animals which you can treat as your pet, but she prefers cats. I prefer the oaks along the Vata. Vata is a river in central Poland, and she says that she prefers these oak trees which are there on the banks of this particular river. I prefer Dickens to Dostoevsky. Dickens, as you know, is Charles Dickens, the English novelist, probably the greatest among the Victorian writers. And Dostoevsky is a Russian novelist, someone whom we remember for novels like Crime and Punishment, Brothers Karamazov, etc. So she prefers Dickens to Dostoevsky. I prefer myself liking people to myself loving mankind. So instead of being a person who loves mankind in general, she prefers to be a person who likes individual people. I prefer keeping a needle and thread on hand just in case. So she prefers to be cautious. She likes to take precautions. The needle and thread here, it indicates the kind of precautions that you would take in case a certain emergency pops out. So she likes to be cautious. I prefer the color green. I prefer not to maintain that reason is to blame for everything. So she says that she likes the color green, and also that she prefer not to maintain that reason is to blame for everything. She does not want to see reason as something, or she does not want to interpret reason as blaming everything that happens around you and blaming everyone around you. I prefer exceptions. I prefer to leave early. So she prefers exceptions. Exceptions, as you know, are things that does not conform to the general. So she prefers exceptions, and also she prefers to leave early. She doesn't want to stay late. She prefers to leave early. I prefer talking to doctors about something else. So it's not just diseases and cure, about her ailments and medications that she would like to talk about to a doctor, but she would like to talk about something else to the doctor. I prefer the old fine-lined illustrations. So rather than the modern illustrations or modern paintings, she prefers the old fine-lined illustrations. I prefer the absurdity of writing poems to the absurdity of not writing poems. So both these instances are absurd as far as the speaker is concerned. Writing poetry as well as not writing poetry is absurd as far as she is concerned, and she says that she would rather prefer the absurdity of writing poems rather than the absurdity of not writing poems. I prefer, where love is concerned, non-specific anniversaries that can be celebrated every day. So normally, you wait for anniversaries to host a celebration or a party. And as far as Wislawa Szymborska is concerned, where love is concerned, if you are trying to define or trying to establish your love for someone else, then like Wislawa, or she prefers non-specific anniversaries that can be celebrated every day. You don't have to wait for a particular day to celebrate. I prefer moralists. Moralists are people who teach or promotes morality. So she says she prefers moralists who promise me nothing. So unlike people who promise you and fail to live up to our expectations and the promises that they have given us, no, she would prefer moralists. I prefer cunning kindness to the over trustful friend. She would like people who are deceptive and at the same time kind rather than over trustful kind of friend. People whom you trust so much that you blindly believe them and later on they turn out to be the other way. I prefer the earth in civis. Civis means civilian clothes. So she would rather see people dressed up in civilian clothes rather than probably military uniforms and the sort. I prefer conquered to conquering countries. So she prefers those countries which were actually conquered. She prefers such countries or she prefers such places which are conquered, and she did not prefer conquering countries. So she would prefer India rather than British when we go down the history. I prefer having some reservations. So she would like to have some sort of reservations against people, against communities, against society. She would like to have some sort of reservations in her mind. I prefer the hell of chaos to the hell of order. So both these contexts are chaos for her, uh, both hell for her. Both chaos and order are hell for her. And the one that she prefers is the hell of chaos. And this particular technique is called juxtaposition, wherein which you place contradictory words in the same line. You have both chaos and order being placed in this particular line, just like we saw many other words in the previous lines. And this particular technique, poetic device, is called juxtaposition. I prefer the hell of chaos to the hell of order. I prefer Grimm's fairy tales to the newspaper front pages. So Grimm's fairy tales are a collection of fairy tales written by the Grimm brothers, both Jacob and William Grimm. So she prefers such imaginative fairy tales rather than the headlines that come in front of a newspaper. Probably what kind of headlines that appear in the front page of a newspaper. So our poet, the speaker in the poem, prefers imaginary, fictionary tales instead of these heart-rending titles that appear in the front of a newspaper. I prefer leaves without flowers to flowers without leaves. So what she says is that she prefers what others might ignore. For example, a leaf without a flower. Nobody wants a leaf alone. people want flowers. Which is why I earlier stated that she helps us to focus our attention on the seemingly insignificant objects that are there around us, the familiar things, an isolated and a leaf which lies there, it doesn't grab your attention. It's probably a flower that grabs your attention. So what she says is that she would rather prefer the leaf without a flower rather than a flower without a leaf. I prefer dogs with uncropped tails. No. Tail docking is the technical term that you employ to describe or to address the process of cropping a tail. And as you know, as you're aware of, the tails of dogs are cropped for many purposes, like therapeutic purposes, cosmetic purposes, and even to prevent injury. So our speaker says that the poet says that she prefers dogs with uncropped tails, dogs which have their fully grown tails. I prefer light eyes since mine are dark. I prefer desk drawers. I prefer many things that I haven't mentioned here to many things I have also left unsaid. So she is kind of concluding the poem. She says, I prefer many things I haven't mentioned here. So she has made many choices, she has made many decisions in her life, and she would like to state all of them, but she gives us a general sneak peek into that particular area. She says, I prefer many things that I haven't mentioned here to many things I have also left unsaid. I prefer zeros on the loose to those lined up behind a cipher. So she says that she would like zeros which are there on the loose, which you see here and there, rather than the zeros which you find in a cipher. A cipher is a message, written in a secret code. I prefer the time of insects to the time of stars. So she prefers the twilight time, the dusk time, the time between day and night, rather than the time of stars. I prefer to knock on wood. I prefer not to ask how much longer and when. I prefer keeping in mind even the possibility that existence has its own reason for being. So that is how she concludes the poem. She says that she believes that there is a reason for our being, our existence. And apart from all the theories of absurdity and existentialism, there might be some purpose to our life. And that purpose might give meaning to our being, our existence. And on that particular note, she concludes the poem. Thank you so much for being with me. Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and protect your family from this global pandemic. Thank you so much for watching this video lesson. I will see you in another video lesson.